You know, sitting at night by yourself, listening to the insanity that is your life, you start to wonder about yourself, about the world, about a lot of things. Sometimes I find it amusing that my camera has better vision than I do. I look at that clock and it's extremely fuzzy, but I look at my phone and it's not. Isn't that kind of funny? Well, random comments about the state of affairs of my vision aside, I have a few comments that I was going to make. One, I'd like to express my gratitude to all of those, friend and foe alike, or whomever or whatever we wish to depict ourselves as the community of humanity in the world, and the beyond spiritual, which may or may not exist depending on your persuasion. In any event, thank you. Sorry if I've been hurtful or resentful or angry or bitter or repeating myself or just delusional. I've had so many problems, so many things go wrong in my life that it makes living very difficult. One thing I've noticed that has been beneficial to me is accepting where I'm at. It's very hard for me to ask for help. I've done it a couple times, but it's a great challenge. It's an extraordinary burden to try to ask people for help in my position. I find it amusing that there's seemingly two perspectives people take. One is that they can shut themselves off and become totally self-reliant, or they can close off their emotions as well and take advantage of everyone around them. Some people won't because of moral prerogatives. They've experienced too much pain, or there's some aspect of themselves or some reason they feel, and I tend to be that of that quarter. And then there's the other side that, those people who do hurt other people, who do use people because of what they're going through, the causal effects of the universe, or just of humanity being dumb shits to one another. And, each action causes another problem. Each personal reaction, every moment of every day, has long-term effects. A lot of times we think they don't. It's kind of amusing. You think about the joke with the old Simpsons Halloween episode where, you kill the butterfly and suddenly it changes the entire perspective of the world 1,000 years later. Or millions of years later, sorry. In any event, though, we think, oh, well, that's huge, and that causes cosmic consequences of vast proportions and blah, blah, blah. But, yeah, there's those factors. But there's also a whole lot of other ones that we don't take into consideration. Like, for example, smiling at somebody, or being nice, or being open. And the problem is it's twofold. Because, guys, you can be very disrespectful to women. Girl can be nice to you, and you take that as an opportunity to hurt them. Of course, the same goes with women, where a guy can smile and be nice, and you think they're flirting with them. When they might be in some way, but in reality, they just want to get to know you. And it's problematic, I think, on some levels because, people have different experiences. And, sometimes guys like me are very repressed and only open up out of their shell every once in a while. And when they do, so, if they have somebody beat them down or twist them along or whatever the case may be, you may push the person off the edge. Now, you may think it's perfectly harmless to, tell a guy or a girl that you want to, that you'll consider the idea of going with them, and you make it sound like there's hope and you want to go, but in reality, you're just keeping your options open. And then later, you, go with somebody else, and then you dump the person. Say, well, I'm sorry, I'm already going with such and such. That can cause long-term consequences of a grave sort. And I think people have to understand that we think things like that. It's just like another story I remember hearing from someone I gave a ride to a college, or to a men's retreat with, who told me that at his work, he worked at least at Microsoft as a manager in the game department, game division, and besides the amusing anecdote that he didn't understand how he was doing the job, because business majors should not be making games and running people who are much smarter than them, at least so the claimant went. Anyway, but that aside, and by the way, I did totally make much by way of great anecdotes to all of you hardcore gamers out there. Yes, there was plenty of plugging for the great video game stuff. So if anything happens, maybe it's something I did. But don't quote me on that. Anyway, besides that, yeah, what was I going to say? Anyway, so besides my random tangent that has expired like several minutes of your lives, for no apparent reason, basically this story involves this guy, is that there was a person in his office who didn't really talk a lot, had some had sort of issues. People really didn't like him or didn't whatever, and he didn't really want to talk to the guy, but he made an effort to try to say hi to him and be friendly. And a number of months later, and he tried to get to know him and learn more about him and other things like that. He'd joke and talk about himself and other things, and as we all sort of do in our nervous state sometimes, depends on your personality, but I'm like this, Jen, in the sense that I use humor as sort of a deflective, and you joke and you grumble about your life and other things. And anyway, this guy comes into his office later, and he brings in an Xbox 360, and he drops it on his desk, and he says, I got this for you. I know that your wife, your wife told you that, she wouldn't let you get an Xbox 360. I sadly can't remember what she wanted him to get instead. I think it was, I think it was something for the kids or something for whatnot. And in any event, though, because of that, this guy turns to him and says, well, I took the gun that I was going to use to kill myself, and I traded it in for an Xbox 360 to give you. You were the first person who ever talked to me, who ever treated me with any respect, who cared about me. And it saved me. And I realize that these stories are singular and anecdotal at best, and they say that it can happen. Not that it's the universal, but I think it's important to take into context how our lives impact others. Seemingly insignificant things, like how you look at a person, impacts them. I've had moments in my life where I've been extraordinarily depressed, and it's been just, I've been thinking about offing myself in a very dark and depressing way, and then something will happen. Someone will smile at me, someone will show some sign of compassion. I can believe that it's God talking through them, but in any event, they make some momentary action towards me that makes me feel better. When my friends care about me, when people care about me or care about you, it impacts you as a person. And I think that as people, we need to take into consideration this. I look at this whole mass shooting thing that's going on, and how everybody's rambling off incoherently about so many things that are seemingly meaningless. And they miss the whole point that so often these types of tragedies occur because people are unobservant. And they're focused only on themselves in many ways. And they're a little niche group. And they don't take into consideration how single momentary actions can cause profound effects. That little bolt that you half-ass screwed in because you just were tired at work that one day and you didn't feel like doing it is the breaking point when the airplane crashes. It was that one solder point that you just did half-ass because you were just having a bad day and your spouse was fighting with you and you got laid off from your other job, or your kid flunked out of school, or there was something that was legitimate, that was genuine, and you really were fucked up, pissed off, sore, tired, whatever. And because of our rushed culture and because of production and everything else, you didn't put in the time. And it's not a blame, but in the metaphor, I would say that the example that the person didn't take the action. And when they didn't, they created a problem. That problem, by half-assing it, not putting in the effort, either taking an action or not taking an action, however you want to look at it, you're still taking an action in either event, but the point is, at the end, that person caused an impact. The plane crashes because of that fault that is not known. That solder, that whatever the case may be, that weld, that electrical wire that wasn't put in together correctly, and because it was in an odd place, or because it was assumed to be correct by a bunch of other guys who are totally overworked and don't have time to look at all the stuff properly, it doesn't get checked, and the quality control is bad. So as a result, they think it's great, and then the plane crashes. But that's not meant as judgment. That's just an analogy saying that as a society, as a people, humanity so often finds itself failing in its greatest capacity, which is for cooperation and for recognizing how we as people react and interact with one another. It's extremely dynamic and diverse. And if you neglect that, you create all kinds of problems. I guess the last thing I'll say, though, is about myself, is how I found asking for help to be so difficult. It truly is. I mean, I think a lot of people may think of me as a person who does ask for help a lot. But in reality, I don't. I ask for some help. I cry out. But really the kind of help I need, I can't articulate. I don't know how to. I mean, maybe you can articulate your ideas about some author that you think is of profound importance, but when it comes down to the most intense, visceral, base emotions, the needs that are the truest, you can't express them. You can't even talk about them. You just lock up because they're so overwhelming. That's the case for me. When it comes to describing my need for affirmation, for acceptance, but I think even more importantly, for people to truly understand me and not bail. In my life, people have thought they've understood where I'm at for a while, but then they leave. Or they stop associating with me for whatever particular reason. Maybe I'm an asshole. Maybe they've got too many problems on their hands. Maybe they've just got, mentors or just busy. And what happens is I get abandoned. Now, rationally, I realize that I'm not really getting abandoned. But with what I'm really going through, which I can't express. I can't show in any simple terms, you know, how complex my life is. So I told my therapist the other day, it's like, you know, it's like when someone says, write about your life, you know, find the most important part of your life and then describe it. I'm like, well, you know, how am I supposed to do that? That's like asking somebody to say which is higher, Everest or K2, and eyeball it, from like the ground. How the hell are you supposed to do that? They're both nearly as tall as each other, and K2 is more dangerous. I guess I find it ironic that as a culture, you know, I don't know. I guess as humanity, it's just so hard for me to try to express where I'm at, how much suffering I'm going through, the pain, the torment. I mean, yeah, I've got problems. I'm a happy kid in a lot of ways, but I think in some ways that's because I shut myself off from all connection with what's going on, really, deep down. The pain, the torment, the kid crying out for help and continuing to be shut down. Because if I didn't, I probably would have given up a long time ago. Walked down into the basement, opened the gun safe, taken it out, brought the case for my side-by-side, opened it up and put two 12-gauge shotguns in and blew up my head. Why? Because I'm all alone. In a world that is miserable and with no avenue for escape. When there is no one there for you, and you are totally and utterly alone, and you can't even find connection with God because you're so broken. I've been there. I know what it's like. People who try to understand but haven't gone through that, they don't have a clue. And the problem with being human is that we can't share thoughts and experiences. So I can't just, think and imagine and you can just feel and know. I have to try to explain it in words. And sometimes words are so limited. And when we're in an emotionally intense stage, it's so hard to talk. You lock up. I do, at least. I either talk too much and I mumble about and I say all these different things and I ramble from subject to subject and tangent to tangent, or I can't say anything. And I just lock up completely. I'll make jokes, I'll do all kinds of things because I'm scared and I'm nervous. Because deep down, I'm afraid that this person who shows interest and compassion in me and who I think is my friend or I think is going to be a great mentor and says, I want to mentor you. But at the end of the day, it's just like my parents. I love them, they love me, but they have so many things on their plate, so many problems, so many, disorders, so many discords, everything going wrong for them to the point that they're broken down and there's no one there to lift them up other than me. They're alone. And I'm alone. Because while they at times were able to pull themselves out and be parents, they can't. They're totally lost. And I'd rather make my life the most miserable thing I can imagine than let them die. Suffering in this chaos, let them just descend into oblivion. If I think for a moment that I can stop that, help them, because I love them, I will. People don't understand that because they don't see inside. They only hear snippets. I can say, like I did to my therapist, I don't want to abandon my parents. I love them. They need me. I realize that I need to help in certain ways, and so on and so forth. And they think, even she admitted. She thought, well, you just need to get on and move out. Then I played a recording of my father that he left me when he was in jail recently, a couple days ago, begging for my help. He's scared. He thinks he's going to die because he doesn't want to stand there any longer. He's psychologically tormented. His mental state is completely shot. And he's horrified. He's terrified. And he's alone. As my mother is in her own psychosis, in her own fears. Everything attacking her, lashing out at her. And there's no one there for her other than her son. Both of them are afraid I'm going to abandon them. And they're so far gone. They have so many things that are harming them that, as she said, she realized viscerally where I was at, that I can't leave. That if something happened to them, I'd never forgive myself. And it's true. And for once, somebody finally understood what I'm going through. People can't, normally. They're not willing to stand in place long enough to see the trees move. Somebody can say the willow bends, but if you don't stand around long enough to wait for the wind to blow, you'll never see it. You'll think they're full of it. That's the thing that's funny. The world is like that. You have to be willing to stay with people long enough to really see where they're at. And so often, we as people, we screw up. We're not very good at showing ourselves for who we are. And it can take moments where God just steps in and pushes us, Or you can just say days where we're, more willing to be open for whatever particular psychological reason. Hey, whatever explanation works. I tend to think emotionally and spiritually as well as scientifically, but again, whatever works. In my case, I understand where I'm at, and I understand where a lot of other people are at too. I don't know if any of my friends happen to be in this position where they can't even express where they're at because it's so bad, and they're so beat down, and they're so trapped in a catch-22. And they think, how can we eliminate this catch-22? But they think, oh, well, it's so easy, we can just cut it away, or, and they don't feel. They really don't feel. Even my therapist, on some level, who didn't, because they didn't understand. They truly did not understand. And then they do, sometimes. God speaks through the darkness. And there's a small flicker of light. And when you're about to drive into a tree or drive off the road, and that impulse is so strong as you drive down I-90, west, and you're so frustrated and you're so angry. Your father, the controlling, whatever, that you want it to end. You want the pain. You want the frustration. You want the hopelessness, the state of being completely lost to end. And it's in those moments, those fragile yet horrific moments that we experience as human beings, that I experience and have experienced. Those moments. That is when it is most crucial for people to be there. And when they're not, terrible things can happen. Sometimes, you know, it's just a car accident, or you drive off a cliff and you bucked up your car. Sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes the world does strange things. Some people live, some people don't. Sometimes it gets to the point where there's mass tragedy and you have massive shootings, you know? Other times, you don't see anything. I think that as people, we have to learn to be more observant and love people and recognize that life is not as complicated, is not as simple as we would like to make it out to be. Now, I don't know if this video is going to reach anybody or be of any value to anybody. I mean, it's almost a half an hour long. I'm sure there's not a lot of people who want to sit that long and listen to me ramble. But if you do, I thank you. And I hope this in some way gives you some value, some contribution. I don't know if it will or not. I'd like to think that maybe my suffering has some positive value, that it can be used for something. But I'm going to have to learn to be content with the fact that it may not. I may just have suffered for no reason whatsoever, and that's just how the universe works. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. But I ask that people with compassion, people who are suffering themselves, who are bitter, who are angry, who are falling down, please ask for help. And those who are falling or who are not, please reach out your hand and grasp them. Please do like my mother that strange day in college when she had an impulse that she couldn't explain to go get a glass of milk, to go get a carton of milk for her mother at this one grocery store in Seattle that was way out of her way. And she did. Then she had another impulse to go over the overpass. And she saw cops. She pulled over. And someone was over the edge. She walked up and recognized the girl. Saw that she was in her study group, Bible study, as part of Young Life. Her friend was mentoring her. She walked up, reached out her hand, said, "I know her," gave her her hand and said, "Give me your hand. I love you. My friend loves you. God, Jesus loves you. Please give me your hand." And she did. And she was pulled over. Later again, when she was in the psychiatric ward at University Hospital, she, tried to catch herself on, light herself on fire. But, at least for that moment, someone was there for her. That's my mom's 45th Street overpass story. I've had a lot of those myself. Not quite as profound, perhaps, but I've had them. And I'm sure other people have, whether they want to admit it or not. In any event, please reach out your hands. Please pull somebody up. I beg you. Not just as one who suffers. Not as one who knows the pain, knows the loss, knows the impact that each of those moments can be. Not to compel you to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. When you could be in such a dark place, to have another reach out a hand to you not for those reasons. Instead, do it because, as a species, as a race, as a polis, as a society, we can't survive without compassion and love. Our greatest adaptation is cooperation, love, compassion, working together, language, the ability to understand on a much more visceral level the plight of our fellow beings. Please, don't waste that. Reach out your hand, take the hold of the hand set before you, and pull with all your might. Embrace them, love them, show them they're not alone, and that the world is not all that it appears to be, and that there is some good and some light in the world. There is love, and they, while it seems so impossible,